Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, it's days before the big general election. How about an election wrap-up plus a little pornographic email update? All of that follows these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, it's just days before the big general election. We've got the governor's race, which is being heavily covered, plus congressional races, state legislature, and how about an update on the pornographic email scandal, the fallout from that? Joining me, we have a panel of the state's leading journalists. Sitting next to me is Angela Columbus with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Across from me is Steve Essick with the Allentown Morning Call, and Mary Wilson, the Capitol reporter for the Pennsylvania Public Radio. Angela, I want to start with you. Here we go. We've lost one Supreme Court Justice. Seamus McCaffrey just resigned. We've got Justice Castile, who's the Chief Justice. His term ends. We have another expiring term of Justice Corey Stevens. I mean, a little chaos on the court, plus 3 vacancies out of 7 coming up. Do I got that about right? Or 3 positions to be elected?
You do.
Go ahead.
You do, and it's, we've been told by people who watch the court very closely that it is the first time in recent memory that there will be 3 seats up for grabs. And, I think what's at stake here is the balance of power on the court. It could go Democratic
or Republican.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think before Joan Ori Melvin resigned, or was forced to resign for obvious reasons from the court. The balance was 4-3 Republican.
Right.
All right, Steve, let's turn to you. I mean, is there anything more going to come out of the pornographic email scandal? You all have gotten the graphic images of some of them. There's thousands more, I take it. There are other people who are involved. Is this over now?
No, I don't think it's over, and I think the ball's going to land back in Attorney General Kathleen Kane's court, because when Chief Justice Ron Castile announced, what he had seen in Justice Seamus McCaffrey's emails, he said there was 4,000 emails that all the justices sent, but only Seamus McCaffrey had sexually explicit pornographic emails. He sent 2,800 emails to the Attorney General's office. About 8% of those were porn. So the question then becomes, well, what else was in there? Was he just saying, hey, this is the golf outing, or was he talking about other issues? I expect, because as a reporter, I'm wondering what those are, and I'm sure there's a lot of defense attorneys, both civil and criminal, that are wondering the same thing. And sooner or later, we're going to see some stuff drop in the courts.
Mary, could the issue be here that there was these discussions between a justice of the Supreme Court and folks in the Attorney General's office, and what was in content? I think maybe that's what Steve's getting to.
This fraternization issue.
Yes.
That was the ostensibly the issue first raised by Castile when he said he wanted to look into these. He said, the content is questionable, but also what I'm most concerned about is this kind of improper relationship exhibited in the emails between a sitting justice and people working in the Attorney General's office. But I think that there are a lot of people who raise eyebrows at that claim, because it's not like all the justices were asked to open up their email accounts and show what their relationship was with members of with people working in the State Attorney General's office. It wasn't a complete audit. It was an opportunity to look at emails that had already been connected to McCaffrey and then see objectionable content.
Angela, there's an interesting aspect of this that, you all have just brought up. You have the independence of the judiciary, private correspondence. Now, you're all reporters. You all want to get everything you can. I think everybody understands that, to protect the public. That's your job. But how far is too far? How much? I mean, and particularly when you're talking about judicial officials, I'm sure you've grappled with that issue.
Oh, absolutely. And obviously, from our perspective, we'd like to see everything. But I think what is important here is that Attorney General Kathleen Kane has opened the door in releasing some of these emails, has really opened the door to making a lot more of this type of stuff public. Because basically what she said is that, well, it's my discretion, and I think that this is in the public interest.
And is that the issue? It's her discretion, and we don't know what else she hasn't released and why she released what. Well, we know she was asked by the governor. Governor Corbett got certain emails to find out if people were in the administration who were exchanging these emails. We know that then Justice Castile, the state Supreme Court head, he says, I want to know if anybody in the court. But how do we know, either one of you, how do we know what else is there that are we selectively getting onto the, getting after some people but not others? Where does
That's a
this
great
go?
question. And there are two sides to there are two different answers. So there's one side that says absolutely right. This has been an incomplete look at all of these emails. But the other side of it is that people are defending Kane's action and saying she's trying to protect the state from lawsuits from people who say that they're protected and that their emails shouldn't be just hung up like dirty laundry.
Yep. Boy, you wanted to make a comment earlier.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that Kathleen Kane released emails on 8 people. And the argument has always been why only those eight people? And I think the bigger question for Kathleen Kane and maybe her future in politics is if you're going to release them, if it's all good for the public good, release them all. That's the argument. She, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of opinion, she botched it. She botched it again as it comes to this politics.
We're almost out of time in this segment. I want to get on to the elections. But here's my but. What can be done? I mean, she's going to make an argument that for whatever legal reasons, for whatever involving pending cases, I mean, you can go through that litany of things that and many organizations have right to know request in for additional information, right?
I think that's true. And Kathleen Kane said, well, she won't release any of the other judges' emails. But if you get some sort of legal motion in a court case, I don't think she can turn around and ignore that. That's going to be coming up and granted, I don't know what any of these judges or justices may have said or done or anything like that. But the lawyers are going to throw some legal arguments against the wall and see what sticks. So it's going to open up. All
right, so I think you're just saying that there's still additional innings to play in this game. All right, when we come up, we're going to turn to the elections a couple of days away. What will the turnout be? What are the more interesting facets that these reporters have covered during the course of the campaign? We'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back, Angela Columbus, Steve Essick, and Mary Wilson, journalists all. Mary Wilson, let me turn to you. I mean, I've heard recently a number of your reports on the NPR affiliates in this state about, you're going around interviewing lots of people. When you've been out in the campaign and, we've talked about issues, we've talked about polls, what struck you as kind of interesting in the course of your coverage of this campaign?
The number of high-profile proxies coming into Pennsylvania to help Tom Wolf, who is reportedly a little bit concerned about turnout in this election. The other thing that I noticed, and it's just anecdotal, but for all the talk about Tom Corbett's weaknesses as an incumbent governor, his weaknesses as a politician, just connecting to large groups of people as opposed to just one-on-one, which people have said he's pretty good at. For all that talk about those weaknesses on his side, I think that the polls show, that Tom Wolf is favored to win, but has a lot of the same apparent personality quirks, I would almost say. Like, he seems to have a lot of the same stiffness of a guy who's not that practiced at rallying a crowd or working a group of people.
Is this kind of excitement? I mean, I know, no Ed Rendell, right? No, and yeah, I get your point about that. I don't know. I mean, is that... And you sort of witnessed the same thing. Not a lot. Is it pizzazz? I mean, maybe is that necessary? Maybe to win I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, I think you need some sort of, you need something to get voters out. You need to somehow inspire them to do so. And I don't know that either candidate has really done that in any real way. I'll take you back to 2002 when Ed Rendell was running for governor, and he had at least the entire city of Philadelphia on fire, getting them out.
Sure.
And you need to get to the polls, you need to vote. You don't see that this time around with these two guys.
Steve, how about you? How about what's your sense about this campaign? Is this too long? Is it too long and too expensive, and we don't know a lot more now?
No, I don't think it's too long.
That's because you like to cover campaigns, right?
This is actually my first statewide campaign I'm covering, but I find it fascinating that Tom Corbett was on the air days after the 4th of July. I was down the shore and I started seeing his commercials come on, and he's still down in the polls by double digits. Mm-hmm. And is it just because he is so disliked for so long by large segments of people? I mean, you see it in your own poll that came out yesterday, Terry, is just Republicans are coming on board now.
Right.
But it's only days away from the election. I mean, he is not even well liked within his own party on a bunch of sides of that. The moderates, the conservatives, social conservatives, fiscal conservatives. It's just that to me is the most stunning thing that it's
taken him so long to win back his own party. Go ahead.
I just want to say, but he didn't even try for very long to win anybody back, in my opinion. So
the one thing that I noticed, and I know all of you were covering these debates, is we saw a different Tom Corbett in the very first debate. Hershey, I think it was the last week in September. And I do think his campaign has been, or Tom Corbett, I'm sorry, his campaign has been more energized. You've been in these events. Don't you get a sense, as Steve points out, that all of a sudden, he wasn't a little lackadaisical, a little laid back, distant and aloof, and now a much more engaged Tom Corbett, but it may be too late. I'm not, suggesting he'll win or he won't win. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so many people made up their minds about what happened to the education budget before those debates even came around. Debates, a lot of people have said, don't change voters' minds that readily. We pay attention to them, but a lot of, regular folk don't pay attention to them. So for 2 years, people were working up this narrative that
he cut spending.
And what baffles me, and I've talked to people who support Corbett, what baffles me is that there wasn't more of an argument to, maybe I'm too naive, but to meet those voters where they are and say, okay, I get that you think I cut spending. Here's my argument for doing it, but I'm going to do my best to make sure that we're restoring funding. There was no effort to do that.
Yes. We're going to run to a break. When we come back, I'm going to let Angela pick up on it. And then there's another question that I think, did the Republicans in the legislature didn't help their own governor out? Something that I know you've all covered. We'll get to that soon.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, Election Day wrap-up. We're not quite to Election Day yet, but it's fast arriving. Angela Columbus here, Steve Essick, and Mary Wilson, all journalists who cover all things politics and, of course, the legislature. You wanted to jump in here on this. A different Tom Corbett since that first debate. More energy, no?
Here's my view of this. I think that so many people made up their mind about Tom Corbett in 2011 after his first budget. And you mentioned a different Tom Corbett. Well, he was different back then. If you remember, he was very adamant in defending his cuts. And when I say defending his cuts, I mean in the sense that he thought that they were necessary. And he made no bones about it. And the Tom Corbett you see now is different. He is telling the story behind why he had to make those cuts and why they were necessary. But that wasn't him back in 2011.
Yes.
And
It's a
that's when
great
people
point.
made up their minds.
And Steve, here's another way to think about it. He's not taking a no, he will not take a no tax pledge, he said, if elected. He'll support what's called a transmission fee for natural gas, not, when it moves, not coming out of the well. He didn't appeal the voter ID law, and he didn't appeal the gay marriage law. Do I got that all right?
Yes, that's
That
correct.
Angela makes a wonderful point.
I was just going to piggyback on what Angela said. Was back in 2011, not only was he very adamant about why the cuts were needed, he was kind of nasty too in defending them. He showed no empathy for anything, and not only that, was while he was cutting it, and people say he didn't cut $1 billion, $655 million of that was federal money. Another $355 million was state money. Very few people realize that or talk about that. There's a big hunk of that was state money. And by the way, while he was cutting all that, he was talking about vouchers. So he's chucking salt in the wounds. He didn't campaign in 2010 on vouchers that I know of. No. And he came into office and he threw that at people. And it was one whammy after another on top of schools.
And Mary, times have changed. I mean, what the voters want now, as I think you're all talking about, Corbett is, and I don't blame a candidate for adjusting to the times. All politicians do that. It's, if you don't, if you're immutable and say where you are, it's a sure guarantee you're probably going to lose. Have you picked up what your colleagues are talking about, this sort of shift that we see now?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in 2011, I had just gotten here, and so I was still trying to get my bearings. But certainly over the past year, it seemed like there was this turn toward maybe a more moderate, going into election mode.
All right, I want to run to a break, and then we come back for the last segment. I want to talk about this business with the legislature. I'll set the scene for this. Tom Corbett's party controls both houses of the legislature, yet two of his big agenda items have been unable to move between a more conservative House and a more moderate Senate. We'll ask the reporters about this when we come back. And he gets into rhubarb with the leaders of his own legislature as we move into this campaign. I want to get into that and ask them how important they think that is in shaping the contours of this election. We'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back with three of the state's top reporters who've covered the legislature and covered the campaigns throughout the state. I mean, as I set the stage for this, Angela Columbus, Governor Corbett, this big agenda, it's been controversial. What's that impact been, you think?
Well, I don't know that he has struck any chords with his agenda, really, with the public. I think transportation did, because it impacts everybody. I think liquor did, but, your polls and others have shown consistently that people, while they think it's a sexy topic, it's not something that'll get them out to the polls. But he also, in his defense, came in, he had never, it was a big learning curve for him, and he was also dealing with a legislature that had, while Republican controlled, and it was his party, the leaders in the two chambers are very different ideologically, personality-wise, and that's a really tough thing to overcome.
Yeah, one of the things I heard, Mary, I'll go to you on this. I think you were around during parts of Bonusgate, is that legislatively, people in the legislature were upset that he sort of prosecuted lawmakers, ex-lawmakers, and staffers. I never thought that was as big a deal, but what do I know? Or was it rather this ideological division that Angela alluded to, a pretty conservative House and a more moderate Senate, and an agenda that just couldn't work its way through?
Yeah, so I think there are three things going on. One is the ideological spectrum at work in the Republican Party as it controls the House and the Senate. So different priorities for the two chambers. So that's going on. You've got kind of this bitter taste in the mouth from all the prosecutions of lawmakers and legislative staff. So that's there. But you also have, and Angela referred to this, a learning curve. I don't think there's much argument in the legislature that Corbett came in and really knew how to push an agenda, how to make sure to track an issue through, how to make a deal so that this issue could go and that could go with it if this one were a little bit stronger. I mean, there just wasn't a sense that Corbett or the staff that he came in with was very adept at that.
Yeah. Go ahead, pick up on that.
And I was going to say too, I don't think that they communicated very well with the legislature to begin with. I think they held everything close to the vest, and when they came up with an idea, sometimes it was an idea that the legislature was like, huh? Like a perfect example is the lottery issue, the lottery privatization of it. Is when they came up with that idea, I'm not sure, I don't think they bounced that off the legislature, and if they did, they sure probably didn't bounce it off of the AARP or the seniors lobbies and that kind of thing. So I think that was an issue. In other words,
they knew that when they talked about privatizing the management of the lottery, it was going to run into pretty steep opposition and didn't go.
Yeah, and they just didn't communicate that well with the legislature, with the people that are going to care about that issue, the senior voters, that sort of thing. And I think a lot of times they caught the legislature off guard. And it's very hard for the legislature, regardless of whether they're in the same party or their ideology, to go along with something if they feel like they're constantly being blindsided.
Right.
And I think that was a big point.
We have about 45 seconds, one-word answer. I'm going to start with you. Angela, big or small turnout on Tuesday? Large or small?
I'd say small to medium.
Small to medium?
Yeah.
I'm going to say medium.
Medium?
Okay, I'll go small.
Small. Mm-hmm. All right, so the facts are in 2010, 46% of Pennsylvanians voted in registered voters. You get down, that I think it's probably going to be lower. I think we're all in agreement on that, at least lower than that. See you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.